So Anj is a painter, a muralist, and a mixed media artist based in Tulsa. Her work is primarily centered around her lived experiences, spirituality, and self-preservation, with much inspiration being drawn from the lives of her loved ones, introspective contemplation, and the human condition. Anj graduated from the University of Central Oklahoma with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in 2018, and early in her career, she exhibited at Oklahoma University, IAO Gallery, and her home university in Edmond. After her move back to Tulsa in 2019, she joined an all-Black artist collective called Black Moon, which Karis mentioned on Monday, if you were in that session. Through her involvement with the collective, she has participated in group shows at TAC Gallery, Living Arts, the Gilcrease Museum, and the Philbrook Museum. At the Philbrook, Anj was featured as the lead artist in the creation of the temporary 60-foot mural installation, Time Travel, and her work, Inseparable, was featured on the May 2021 cover of Tulsa People magazine. In March, she resigned from her role within the collective and has since been featured as a muralist for the Sunny Days Mural Festival, exhibited at Main Site in Norman, been commissioned for a 75-foot mural, and is now serving as program chair and development chair, co-chair for the Sunny Days Inc., an arts nonprofit dedicated to empowering women and non-binary artists through the creation and advocacy of public art. As her career reaches forward, she is staying actively invested within the arts community of Oklahoma, and she is optimistic that the art scene will continue to be more diverse and inclusive in the future. We love to see it. I'm so glad to have you here and to share more about grants and apps. I feel like you're super qualified and a pro at presenting this topic, so we're lucky to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor that you considered me for this, and it really is like solidifying how I'm feeling going into these roles and my professional development. So I really appreciate it. And yes, the bio feels like I'm bragging, but I guess that's what bios are for. So thank you for that. I actually used to work for Oklahoma Visual Arts Coalition, so it's just really nice and I was managing the Thrive Grants program, so it's just really a full circle moment for me to be here. So I really appreciate it. You can see my presentation and my little box, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Grants and applications. This is presenting your best self by me. So this is advice that I want to give you all and kind of just like a brief overview of how to like reduce these barriers of intimidation and get started doing something big and great. Like you literally can do it. If I can do it, so can you. I wanted to start by kind of giving a little background about myself. I know my bio was just read, but I wanted to kind of let you all know that I am qualified for this. And just so you have like an idea of where this information I'm sharing is coming from. So less about me and more about like why I'm qualified to say this and just understanding the context of where this advice is coming from. So I've been grant writing for like about 1+ years. I've been doing grant consulting, and a part of that was at OVAC for 2+ years. I've been managing like application support for fine artists at the Tulsa Artist Fellowship for about 1 year. I've been working in development, which is a bigger umbrella of fundraising and writing grants for 1+ year. So my current roles are development co-chair and programs chair for Sunny Days Inc. I'm a grants manager and development advisor at Spark Creative Lab, which is a local nonprofit to Oklahoma City. And I'm a nonprofit consulting and visual development agent at STIR, which is a marketing firm. And on top of all of that, I am a visual artist, muralist, and business manager for Art by Aunj since 2018. Okay, so let's start with the very basics. Like, what is a grant? I don't want to presume anybody already knows that. I will be brief though, because if you do, I don't want to waste too much time on it. It's good to identify what the difference is between those two so you can have an idea of what your best approach is. Grants, in a nutshell, serve a wider purpose most of the time. There is usually an obligation to do what you say you're going to do. You're in some ways on the hook when you receive a grant, because essentially an entity, whether that be an organization, foundation, individual, is offering to give you money that you do not have to pay back for you to do something that either benefits their mission, or this is less likely, but that they do exist. There are grants to serve individual people, like to buy supplies or to emergency grants for like unrestricted funding to support artists who are struggling. Those do exist, but they are not the majority of grants that exist out there. OVAC is actually one organization that does offer grants for individuals to buy supplies and pursue educational opportunities. So I'm generalizing here, but most of the time, when you get a grant and you're on the hook, you have to keep good records and you have to do what you say you're going to do. Now, versus an individual application, general application, and what do I mean when I say application? Because application forms are always existing within the grant process as well. But when I say general applications, I mean anything outside of the grant. So something where it serves the needs of an individual. So through a wider purpose entity. So once again, it could be from an individual, a foundation, a organization, and they're offering an opportunity. And usually these are something you want to pursue if you're wanting to further your career. So these are usually a little bit more self-serving. They're usually paid opportunities to do X thing. So some there's a wide range here. Some applications are prepared by experts who understand how to work with artists, and some are not. And you will see the wide range of what that looks like when people don't know what they're doing when it comes to expressing an opportunity to the general public. I also want to say, as we move forward here, if you are not a visual artist, if you're a creative of any kind, a lot of this advice will still be applicable to you as you attempt to apply for opportunities and grants. So hopefully I made that pretty clear. So grants basically usually serve a wider purpose. They usually go beyond the individual. They usually make an impact in the community, and you're on the hook to do what you say you're going to do, versus individual career development opportunities anywhere from, you want to showcase at our gallery? Do you want to make a mural for us and we'll commission you for it? It's career development and usually a paid opportunity to complete X thing. So now that you understand like what is a grant and what is a general application, which one should you apply for? A well-rounded individual is probably going to apply for a mixture between the two throughout their lives. If you're just getting started and you have like some idea bubbling in your head and you don't know where to start, this page is basically for you. So which do I choose? So you have to consider your idea first and foremost. If your idea is big and serves a wide audience, does good for people, makes a difference in your community, no matter how large or small, you should probably apply for a grant. It sounds like you have a project that is going to create some sort of impact for people beyond yourself. That's usually where you can look for grant funding, i.e. being on the hook, doing what you say you're going to do. Let's say you're working and attempting to further your career as a creative, gathering like new experiences, wanting to meet new people and learn from those around you. You should probably apply for a general application for an artist residency or opportunities to show your work, or to be like a smaller part of a larger project that someone else is putting on. So think about what you want, and that's the direction you should go. I feel like most people on this call are probably looking to apply for opportunities to get paid, and people who have kind of done that long enough and start thinking, I want to start something myself. I want to make a difference. Then you're going to start navigating the grant world and start getting funding for projects that you're putting on, and then inevitably opening applications for people to be a part of that said project. Great example is Caitlin Noel Nick. That's literally what she did. So moving forward here, you've decided, I want to apply for a grant. I've been working gigs for a long time and I'm ready to make an impact. What makes a good grant application? I know this is a question that buzzes around most people's minds all the time. Maybe not, but it buzzes in my mind a lot. I'm going to be on this page for a little bit longer because there's a lot that goes into making a good grant application, but I'm going to try to simplify things so it makes sense and doesn't seem intimidating, because it really is as simple as, I have an idea and I need money to fund it. So once again, we're circling back to idea. That is our main point. You can do everything right as far as writing your grant, but if your idea is not compelling, it will be extremely difficult to break through that barrier and get funding. For example, I have been on the back end of grant review panels, and I have seen applicants check all the boxes as far as the grammar's good, it's clear what they want to do, they've submitted all the requested materials, but their concept is not strong, and they get denied over and over and over again. Now, OVAC is an interesting example because we are one of the few organizations that regularly tries to provide feedback. And if an organization does that, utilize it, leverage it. It's kind of rare, and listen to them. Don't just reapply and think that, oh, it's just a matter of time. That's not the case. You've got to try and improve before you keep trying and trying and trying again and wasting your time. And on the same vein, you have to consider your reputation. Depending on what organization you're applying for, like it might look bad, like that you never know what's going on behind that curtain. And if they see that you aren't listening to their feedback and you're applying over and over and over again, that makes you look like someone who's not willing to develop and grow. So consider your reputation. When you're applying for things like this, consider your eligibility. It also doesn't look too great when you basically didn't read the eligibility requirements and applied for something anyway that you're 100% not qualified for. Be detail oriented. That's kind of a huge thing too. So what makes a good grant idea? Consider your idea and as far as it impacts others outside of yourself. There are most certainly grants out there for supplies, education, self-serving ventures. They do exist, as I mentioned before, but big money grants usually want impact. So good segue from talking about ideas to impact. They tie together. Does your idea impact anything beyond yourself if you are going for one of those big money grants? Now, I know some of you on this call might not be going for things like that, and starting maybe small with, I want a grant to pursue this class because I want to learn watercolor. Like that is a great place to start, and everything I've said so far should be able to get you there. But impact for those who want to do something a little bit bigger. So what do I mean by impact? When you're brainstorming your idea, you need to be able to answer certain questions. And if you cannot, your idea is not as compelling as you might think it is in your head. So it exists in your mind, but if it comes out of your mind and it doesn't land as being concrete, you have things to work on there. So who is your audience? So when I say impact, who is it impacting? Like I said, it doesn't have to be, large or small. Impact is important. How are you serving them? How are you helping them? What opportunities are you providing to them? How are you supporting them? How are you making a difference, no matter how small? How many partners are you working with? How informed are you in your decision making here? If you say you want to work with inner city kids to make a difference in their classroom and teach them the arts for a 2-week session, do you have any experience working with inner city kids? Are you working with partner organizations that do have that experience? That's going to make you much more credible to a grant reviewer because, of course, we all have ideas, but you need to work with experts. And this also ties back to what I said earlier about there's a range from expert to people who have no idea what they're doing, putting out applications. And for those people who have no idea what they're doing, like they should be consulting experts. They should have advisory people. They should hire consultants to say, I've never worked with an artist before. How do I do an open call? Because it's really not that simple if you haven't been existing in that world before. So have informed decisions in regards to your impact and consider how qualified you are to impact those people or that said community. How do you plan on measuring that impact is another huge thing with grants. So the bigger ones per se, but most of them at the very least want concrete, measurable goals. So I know what I want to do. I concretely know how this is helping. And I have a way to know that it worked. So it's one thing if you're like, I want to do this. I just want to make people more happy. That's not measurable. But you could make it a little different. Like I want people to walk away with a more connected experience to the arts after they leave this. So then you could give them a survey that says, how would you say percentage more you felt better or more connected to the arts after leaving? So that would be your way of measuring your impact. Surveys are a great way to measure your impact. So when it comes to that impact, we want quantitative and qualitative data most of the time. So what does that mean? How many people did you help? What are the numbers? How many people showed up to your event? You know, if you even can get that demographic info, it's pretty valuable. And on top of that, how did you make people feel? You need both. Ultimately, if you're doing something big, it starts with a story. Stories are compelling. I made a difference in someone's life, and here's their story. Now, we're dreaming big here. I don't want anyone to feel intimidated, but when you work your way up to bigger things like this, you need to keep those things in mind. Your project can really not hold water if you have no idea how to record its impact. So last but not least, on grants, control. So what do I mean when I say control? There is a ton you cannot control about this process. So control what you can. Don't let it put you down or make you feel sad when you put a lot of work into something and you don't get it. That is all a part of the process. And that means you're learning every step of the way. What you can't control. People. That's the number one. You cannot control people. You cannot control the people who are going to be the reviewing applications. You cannot control grant panelists. At the same time, you need to know and understand that these are ordinary people. Like, sure, they are experts half the time. Sure, they are qualified most of the time, but they are ordinary people just like you and me. Nobody is better than anybody else. Everybody has the preconceived notions. It doesn't matter how long they've been working in the field or not. They are just people with opinions and experiences trying to do the best they can do to select the best applicant for whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. So they make mistakes. They don't always remember what they said. they breeze through applications sometimes. And a lot of the time, this task of reviewing applications or grant requests is something that resides on their to-do list. They're probably doing a lot of stuff, and this is just one of the many things. And they kind of just got to get it done. That's how it goes a lot of the time. That's not always true. There's always exceptions to everything I'm going to say today. I am generalizing, but it really helps me to understand the perspective of the reviewer when I'm preparing my grant applications and applications for things, because it helps me understand what I can control and what I can't. Another really fascinating thing about people is that you can utilize psychology to be more persuasive with your applications. There's little secret tricks and things you can leverage to persuade someone when you're not in the room and they're looking at a paper of how you presented yourself. As I keep going through this, I just want to reinstate that it's not that they don't care when they're breezing through applications. They don't care about what you're trying to do. They most certainly do. Most of the time they care. I'm saying they are human, and you have to humanize this entire experience to make it less daunting. So consider what it might feel like to have several days to review 6 2-page applications that include a proposal, upload materials, and a timeline and a budget. That's not too bad. You would take your time with each one. You'd probably remember each person's name and what their project was about off the top of your head, because that's not too many, and that's exciting what they're trying to do. Now consider what it might feel like to have 2 months to review 2,000 applicants that include the same amount of data, proposal, budget, timeline, and upload material. How do you think that would make you feel? You would probably try to read through them as quickly as possible. By the time you got through them all, you would most likely forget most of them, and you would only remember the ones that stood out. So how do I make you stand out? That's kind of a big point here that we're going to get to. So they don't not care, but sometimes it's just a lot to look through. So very different experience here. I can't say this enough, how helpful it is to put yourself in the role of the reviewer when making creative decisions on your applications. Sometimes that is a matter of researching beforehand. So if you're applying for a grant and it's a Creative Capital grant, that is a very popular, well-known arts organization. You better believe you are going to have a ton of competition. Keep that in mind. Try to stand out. On the other hand, your friend is putting on a project and he's opening a call for some ideas for the exhibition space. And maybe like 6 other people are going to apply and he's your friend. Like, you're probably going to get it. Like, those and everything in between exists. Let's discuss smaller grants and how my advice here will also be applicable to general applications for paid work. This next section really touches on what you can control when it comes to smaller grants and general applications. They generally follow most of these rules. Number one, this is kind of the scary one, but it also is kind of fun. Relationships. We're all people, right? I know it seems like there's this barrier of there's this website and this mystery behind who's reviewing and this intellectual diet, text that makes you feel intimidated. But the reality is we're all just we're people, and relationships are key to everything in this world, everything humans have come to know, everything. That's why they always say it's all about who you know, because that is applicable in almost every career field I've ever even considered thinking about. So build relationships. So sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not, but you always want to try. So like I said, the earlier example of your friend who's putting on a project and a really well-known entity, creative capital, and everything in between. A lot of times, for example, creative capital, you could say I'm going to send an email because it says, let us know if you have any questions. Most of the time they want you to ask questions because guess what? They're sick of getting thousands of applications from people who are not eligible to apply. So send that question, send that inquiry and say, hey, I was wondering if I was eligible for this and I missed the info session. Is there any way you can answer this? More so than not, they will reply happily. And that is a moment to either continue the conversation or have already, in a sense, psychologically touched base with someone who may be in touch with people who are reviewing these applications. And they're like, wow, I noticed that this person really cares about what they're submitting. They sent me an email to make sure. Something as small as that could put a seed of thought in someone's mind and make you stand out. And on the low, relationships, have relationships with people, connect with people that are doing great things, and connect with people that inspire you and that you admire. You will end up being more like them over time just by being in their circle. That's exactly what happened to me. And I cannot reinforce how important that is. So try and build that connection, even with grantors and smaller things. Try and reach out after you've attempted your relationship and considered your relationship to the entity, and you start building your application. So know your audience. Who are you speaking to? Research them. Don't just fill out the form and hope for the best. Read their mission statement, read their about. You never know what you're going to find. That so-and-so started this in 2021 and then blah, blah, blah was involved. And you'd be like, oh my God, I know her because I'm building relationships, right? And you're like, I'm going to reach out to her. And also when you know your audience and you understand who they are, what they want, you can also start looking at their buzzwords. What kind of words do they use on their website? Do they consistently say they want BIPOC minorities? Do they consistently say they really care about the environment? Those are things you want to keep in mind. And a little psychological trick I like to use is picking and plugging some of those buzzwords in a really discreet way to covertly make them feel as though you very much align with what they are trying to do. Because at the end of the day, no matter if it's a person or a massive org or a big foundation above that org, they're all people who have a goal and they have an agenda. And the more you can align to that agenda, the more likely they will choose you because you are basically doing the work for them of furthering their goal. So align yourself with who they are and understand who they are and do your research. Cohesion, number 3. So what do I mean by cohesion? How do you look on paper? You're not going to be there unless you've built that relationship. And when I tell you about I'm going to go back to relationship one more time because you can do a lot of crap. Sorry, you can do a lot of things wrong. But if you have a good relationship, you might still get it. That's how important it is. But if you don't have the relationship, which is most of the time, if you do 2 through 6, you're more likely to be considered. So going back to cohesion, what do you look like on paper? You're not in the room to defend yourself. Guess what? You're not in the room to answer any questions either. So when you read through what you have decided to pursue, are you considering questions? Does it make you think Are they going to understand that I meant this instead of this? No, they're not. Like, assume that they're not going to get it. Make it as clear as you can and make yourself look good on paper. So, what I mean by that, another psychological trick here is if you have to upload a resume, an artist statement, and images, and a PDF of your images with titles, how's it going to look if on every document you used a different font, you used different colors, you misspelled things? I would think they are not prepared. How's it going to look when everything works together and it looks like you've taken your time to pay attention to detail, made sure you were eligible, made sure that all your documents look like they came from the same person? That's going to look like she's large and in charge. She's got her stuff together. Because something else I forgot to mention is with grants, like I said, it's different than a loan, right? You're given money, you're on the hook, but you don't have to pay it back. And because of that's a big deal for someone to give someone money that they don't owe back. And so that's why it's super important that you look prepared to play, okay? So make yourself look good, make sure all your things are in order, and be clear and clean, okay? So number 4 kind of ties into that, clarity. So when you're reading through your proposal and you're looking at your budgets and you're looking at your timelines, does it all make sense, or do you raise questions? Like, does it raise questions? Like, if you say, I'm going to work with 17s in the week of December 20th, and they're all going to have books brought in from me from established authors, and then they look at your budget and there's not a line that says books and supplies. I'd be like, what? Like, you missed the main point. And that's like, as silly as that example was, I've seen things like this. So make sure that it all lines up and make sure you're being clear with your writing. So what I mean by that is that general audience. So once again, people are reading this from all different backgrounds, from all over the world. You want whatever you read to come across as clear. They should be able to identify what it is you want to do, how you want to do it, when it's going to take place, what it's going to cost, and when you're going to be done. Like, anyone should be able to read that and understand. So layman's terms, grants, that usually comes across as a little drier, not as passionate and flowery and poetic. You don't want to be cold, but you don't want to be using words that most people don't get. You want them to understand what your project is about. Now, the only time there's an exception there is for different opportunities, like arts residencies. They're using flowery art speak, and they kind of want you to as well. Like, your artist statement is kind of meant to be confusing. Like, flowery language, it's like, oh, it's so complex, I can't even understand. So there's exceptions. So that ties back into knowing your audience. Who are you even speaking to? Is this a grant or an artist residency? You want to approach those two things differently. Number 5, final review. So you've done all the things right. To you, it looks good. Okay, you got the relationship, your audience is intact, things are cohesive, and you're clear. If you have the time, which I know most of us will not, because I don't even most of the time, but have your colleagues look it over. You never know what another set of eyes is going to bring to fruition. It's basically a way to have that reviewer look at it, like a blind review. It's like your friend might be someone that is like someone on the panel, and let them just look it over and see what comes to mind. Now, if you don't have time for that, which I know a lot of times it's, hard to be this prepared, take a break. Give yourself a day. Come back to it with fresh eyes. Never just sit down, write a grant, and submit it. Don't do that. Write it, draft it, take a break, come back, revise, take one more break, come back, fresh eyes. You never know what you're going to see. When you do that, you're basically creating this psychological, thing where you're acting as someone who's looking at it again for the first time, just because you walked away from it. Okay, now finally, self-assurance. Know that you tried your very best. If you did all these things and you still didn't get it, that's not on you. You tried your very best, and that's what's most important, is that you took the shot, because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Someone said that to me once upon a time and it has stayed with me. Okay. And I know that's a quote from like a famous person, but when you hear it from a friend, it's more impactful. So you're great. If you're doing all this stuff, you're doing really great. And I'm proud of you. So that wraps up the presentation about grants and applications. I do want to stay connected with you all. For those who I'm not already connected with, please follow my accounts, reach out to me for advice. So conversational advice will always be free. And if you care to work on something big and need consulting, I'm just getting started and I have an affordable rate for development support. So that is a service I do offer. But once again, conversational advice, friendly advice, always free. Thanks again for being here and for bettering yourself one little step at a time. That's what I did, and you can too.
Yay! Thank you, Anj. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Anj, I just want to say first off, like, I think what you like, the way you talk about grants and applications, like, I feel like you really put the human element in it, and like that it feels really refreshing, specifically with like the use of like psychology and like the really paying attention to like who are you impacting, like who are you working with on the other side of this grant, like, and really putting the human element back in. I think that's really unique and helpful, so thank
Oh my
you.
gosh. Thank you so much. Like, it's literally my pleasure to be here.
Highly recommend working with Anj, at least especially with that, like really nailing down the specifics like that we talked about, and having that professional eyes on your app before you submit it for sure. So are there any questions from the audience? If you guys have any, you're welcome to unmute or drop them in the chat. Karis said, do you or anyone ever feel that occasionally you lose the soul of a project as you adjust for the panel? And if so, have you ever abandoned that funding opportunity to secure the authenticity of your project?
That's a really interesting question, Karis. Thank you. Now, the way I see it, I think adjusting yourself to the requirements of the application and the panel and being as persuasive as possible would actually improve your project. And I think if you have an idea that's pretty magical and exciting and authentic, it only makes it better to nail down the specifics and to present it properly. That's going to make your project bloom. If it feels as though it's reducing authenticity to do that, then it might not be something that is as structured, and that's okay. It might be something that's just between you and your friends and your community and shared around and about. I think that those things are those things have a place and they weren't covered today. So I don't by any means want you to feel like if I have an idea, it needs to fall into a grant or an application. It can just be for funsies. And when you do things for fun like that, you don't have to consider all the impact and the panelists and how you make them feel, and if your project is solid enough to be compelling. So I hope that answers your question.
Right? Like it's okay to be picky about your funders if it's not a good fit.
Okay to be picky about your funders,
Yeah.
for sure. Like if your project or idea needs funding, then yeah, be picky. Find something that aligns with you. I don't know if I even mentioned this, but I think like in a way I kind of did when I said about alignment to the organization. Yeah, don't change your idea to fit the needs of them. Only apply to organizations that already align with you. So you should only have to like tweak things a little bit to make it more compelling, like using their buzzwords and aligning with their mission and talking about how you align with it too. But don't apply for a boating grant for your creative art project. It's like they don't get it and they're never going to. Miriam, oh, thank you. It was so helpful. I wanted to ask, what is the best way to respond if we should, to a rejection to a grant or application? So that's an excellent question. I think, like I said earlier, OVAC is one of the few that is willing to give feedback, but I recommend when you get a rejection to inquire about feedback. That's about all you can do. Like I said, sometimes depending on the entity, they are overwhelmed with apps. And sometimes they don't provide feedback because of that. Sometimes they literally say that on their website. And the reality is, if you get it, that's rare, but it's worth a shot. And no one's going to be mad at you for saying, I really appreciate the opportunity to apply for this. And I'm really working on developing my applications, submission materials. Is there any possibility that you have feedback? And then we leave it at that. Most of the time they won't respond, or they'll say, I'm so sorry, because of the high quantity of applications we get, we cannot provide feedback at this time. And that's better than nothing. And it also, once again, ties to your reputation of someone who cares, shows up, and asks the right questions.
Agreed. It's like another way to shoot your shot, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, because it doesn't
For
hurt.
next time, it's like, okay, I'll apply again next year, and maybe they'll remember that I was like, hey, I'm trying to do better.
Right. So yeah, we have a question from Amy Sanders. She said, any tips for grant writing with a partner or collaborative group? That she said, I've only ever written grants for myself, but am about to start writing one with a fellow artist and would love any insight to make that experience smooth and successful.
Excellent question, Amy. And shout out to Amy for being one of the best grant writers I've seen. I was working at OVAC when Amy was applying for grants, and I was always impressed with Amy's submission materials. So that's an excellent question. And I'm actually kind of doing that right now. I'm working on a team to apply for a grant. And the way I see it, because too many hands in the pot can slow down the process, make things a little messy. I think the group needs to identify who has the most experience. And, at the true core of it all, someone might have experience, but might not be any good. So identify who has experience and who has like the credibility to back up that experience. And that person should take the lead on the grant. And what that means is researching the grant, drafting the initial application. Once you have that, you identify who is going to edit, revise, support. So what I have found is that in Google Docs, which is what a lot of people will use to like collaboratively edit things, it doesn't feel great when you work really hard to draft something and then you have an editor come in and chop everything up with the way they would say it. Because at the end of the day, there's no like 100% right way to write things. As long as your grammar's right and you're being clear and concise, like it's good. But some people get lost in the sauce and believe like you should say this because blah, and maybe they don't have a reason. So it's like the way I see it, have that most experienced person draft it, and then have people come in that you trust and who can be prompt because we got deadlines to comment. So don't offer revisions to writing, but comments. So a commenter could say, this paragraph feels misleading. We don't actually do that. Could you consider including the point about how we do this instead? So it's saying, I trust that you know how to write and you can revise this to be more clear instead of, I'm going to rewrite everything, because then you have this person's language, this person's language, this person's language, and then the person who's on the lead has got to take all of that and try to make sense of it, and it just creates more work for everyone. So yeah, that's basically it. Let them comment and give them a deadline to finish submitting their comments, and then wrap it all up in a tight little bow and submit it. I hope that was helpful.
That's solid advice, Anj. I really appreciate, again, bringing it back to like that human, like emotional intelligence almost, like, like putting yourself in their shoes. Like, how would it feel to have someone come in and like just totally like throw a bomb on like what you've worked on? So yeah, I think that's really considerate and like something I've never thought about. Yeah, that's so helpful. Thank you. Yeah, Amy agrees.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Caitlin. Oh my gosh.
Yay. Oh, we're feeling empowered in the chat. Kara said, I am determined to use your advice to finally nail one. Thank you. Yay. Good. Well, this was a
That
great
is exactly what I
session.
want to hear, that you're empowered to pursue your next thing. and reduce the barriers. So once again, I'm here, and I know Karis and I have worked on things. Karis is actually helping me learn design in Adobe, and vice versa. So I'm always here for that, Karis.
Hey,
And I'm just
Anj,
really excited. Thank you so much, everyone. Yes.
I have one more question for you. And it can be brief. We're almost at our time, which is excellent. Do you have any I know you mentioned creative capital being competitive and then also doing a lot of like relationship building to find, word of mouth opportunities through your network. Are there any other ways to find grants, like or look
Mm,
where to look for artists?
that's an excellent question. I did not cover that at all. So I'm going to put some resources here in the chat. They're not links, but you should just copy and paste this and research, plug it in on Google and just type like art, so you make sure it's like the same thing. And then there's one more. So these are like 4 lists I have found to be free and very helpful in regards to keeping artists in the know about what's coming down the pipeline in regards to emergency funding. Obviously, OVAC is a resource. OVAC is a resource, so always reach out to OVAC. OVAC has like 4 quarterly grants that it's every quarter of the year. Those are available to Oklahoma artists only. So take a look at those lists too, like jot those down. It's good to have, stay on the mailing list for these entities because OVAC sends opportunities. They have exhibitions all year. Bomb Magazine kind of has like higher end fine art opportunities. Creative Capital has anywhere from grants to arts residencies, and Cafe is even more broad and has like public art calls and a lot of exhibition opportunities. A lot of them are paid, I will say. And to have the full access to Cafe, you do have to log in and make an account, but it is free. So those are all places where you can like stay in the know about what's coming down the pipeline if you ever decide you want to start your full-time art career and start by just submitting a bunch of applications and keeping the ball rolling. Yeah, Bomb Magazine. Yep. Amy, I'm glad I could add another one to your list. I found out about that one while I was working with a Tulsa Artist Fellow, because that's a list that they stayed on top of. It's a magazine, so usually they like have an article, then they'll be like fall opportunities. So it'll be kind of, that's not what they're all about, obviously. So you have to find it, but they usually have like a list, and they've done the research to identify, and then they'll make a list for you. So it's like, oh, yes to that. Yes to entities compiling research for you.
Yes, for sure. Um, that was excellent. Thank you so much, Anj. Thank you for answering that last question too. I know that I definitely recommend the Creative Capital newsletter as well as Cafe Opportunities and the Artwork Archive. So thank you. It's so awesome.
Oh yeah. And there's a lot of local opportunities that maybe don't fall on these lists too. Like there's lots of grant opportunities coming out of Tulsa. So sometimes you just gotta like stay in the know outside of that, but stay connected, build those relationships.
Mhm. Well, on that
Right.
note, if you guys would like to stay connected with Art Friends and everyone who teaches for Art Friends and is an Art Friends member, here is our Instagram. And then here is our website. We'll be back tomorrow with our next speaker session. And all of these recordings will be uploaded after it ends and made shareable. So you'll get all the details. But yeah, I hope you guys all have a wonderful week and I will see you soon. Anj, thank you so much for coming today. We love you and appreciate you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.